Hey everyone, welcome back to the Rollout. I'm Linsay Rousseau.
And I'm Genevieve Marie. Hello and welcome. As you can
So
see, we're alone today.
we're alone, no guests, but that's because we're going to do another deep dive, which we felt was appropriate. And if you can't tell by our backgrounds, or if you're listening to our podcast, we are going to be diving into the global cultural phenomenon that is Squid Game on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, spoilers ahead. So many spoilers, all the spoilers.
Yeah.
Just stop now, go watch it. You're one of like the only people in the world apparently that hasn't seen it, because it is now Netflix most watched show of all time in every language.
Right.
Wow.
Like and subscribe, click off if you haven't seen it.
Yes. Please watch our other videos and then come back to this one after you've binged the 9 episodes. If you can stomach it. So yeah, it's quite amazing that a show like this is now the most watched show on Netflix. And I was racking my brain trying to think like, how is this more watched than, like The Witcher or some of the other stuff that they have. And I just I kept seeing articles about the politics involved and all of that. And then now you look at all the protests that have happened and the unions that are going on strike and everything. And I'm kind of like, I feel like people are kind of fed up with the rich, wealthy people fucking the rest of us over. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, well, we're in a place right now where we have great cultural intersection when it comes to systems of capitalism.
Right.
Because capitalism doesn't know borders.
Right. We are in a global economy, both socially, economically. I mean, if we want to or not, everything is tied together. Yeah.
Right. Also, debt, very much a universal issue that a lot of us, are facing. And so I think that, and also just because the fact that it is one of those like car crash, you can't look away sort of shows where it's got that like Final Destination / that like horror film draw to it, that there is a lot of interesting concepts that they're dealing with politically, economically, but there is also a lot of spectacle. And so there's a lot of draw to the show in that regard. And also, the performances are fantastic.
Oh, the acting is it's phenomenal, with the one exception, which the internet has already talked about ad nauseum, the VIPs, which there's a lot of explanations as to why that ended up the way it did. But the core cast performances were spectacular.
Right. Speaking of, let's just go right into how the 1% is portrayed in this.
Not good.
It's
it's interesting.
We also have this sort of, it's difficult for creators, especially if they're in this obviously was a foreign film, but production. But I find Hollywood has a very difficult time portraying people who are privileged, because most of the people making these
is them.
It's
a self-reflection. It's like, well,
them.
Yeah.
I also think that it's very hard to show people of that social status, and because usually and they came in at the end, so they don't really have that much screen time to portray like a more realistic version of what that is. You kind of get more
character development for them.
You get more mustache twirly shorthand version of, this is a group of rich dudes, and they're super privileged, and they're going to say and do weird shit just to show you that these are the bad guys.
And it's quite fitting that they're speaking English, and most of them had American accents. Not all of them. There was a couple other accents that we heard from them, which I think is telling in and of itself as well, because not only are we talking about an analysis of wealth disparity and, you know, the disparities between the 1% and the rest, it's like, not only are they the 1%, but they are Americans, which I think it goes to what a lot of people have been seeing in the world lately, is that when you think about like the evil, wealthy 1% capitalists, most people default American,
right?
Whether or not that's accurate, but you know, that seems to be what people tend to default to.
Right. Well, I would also argue that a lot of the rich American, you know, a lot of the tourism,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that goes in for that type of thing, especially if it's like you know, like the slave trade and stuff. A lot of that is perpetuated by tourists who go to other countries and partake in these other underground / illegal economies. And you know, there is that, and I think that is probably a way that, you know, one of the reasons why that they did it the way that they did it. You also have the one Japanese businessman as well, who is wearing the extremely conspicuous deer antler head, which Steve and I were talking about. We're like, that guy just wanted to be the one to stand out. Like, you know, he did, you know, he like came to play and play big.
Right.
And everybody else is just kind of side-eyeing. Like, of course he did. Of course he showed up in the deer antler head. So a lot of the discussion on the internet is who's the real villain, you know?
Right.
And
is it the 1%? Is it ourselves? You know,
I feel like unless if you haven't been thinking the big thoughts, you know, during the pandemic, and I think I think the answer is not, it's not simple, but it's easier than people are making it out to be. Like, of course, it is the people who are perpetuating these systems that we live in. Of course, it's the people who have the resources and the money and all the power who either ignore the people who are in, you know, poor, disadvantaged situations, and they ignore it to make the world more palatable, or because it's, you know, too difficult for them or whatever, or because they're not profiting. Like, to help us would be not to profit off of us. It would be antithetical to the capitalist, you know, structure and society that makes them the money, that makes them the power, and gives them, you know, all the opportunities in the world that they have. So yeah, I mean, our fingers should be squarely pointed at the people in the mass, you know, partaking in this stuff. But then you have the other people who are essentially victims, but they are fucking trash.
Well, and it's that whole idea of, and I'm going to kind of flip this. It's like, you know, that old mantra, you can teach, you know, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, teach a man a fish, he'll eat for his whole life. And then, you know, again, looking at the traditional power behind unions, it's like, there would have been so much more power had they banded together. And I'm not just saying in the context of Squid Game, but it's like, if all of these 400, what did they start with? 467 people had banded together to, I don't know, reform society, as opposed to killing each other and only one person gets to profit. I mean, it's basically telling us, yes, capitalism is evil, but we're also responsible for being in this situation because none of us are banding together to fight back. We are all so fiercely independent that we only care about each other. And that's one of the big criticisms coming out about, you know, especially the US and a lot of Western countries, is that people only care about themselves. They don't care about the greater good of society, which is why we've got such a huge climate crisis and we don't have universal health care and universal education, because it's just me, 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 which I think is really pointed out in this show. Yes, these people are in horrible situations. They have shit healthcare, they're in debt, but they're still willing to destroy everyone else so that they succeed.
Right. Well, and that's, I'm going to point something out, because that's the way that we're taught to play the game.
Yeah.
And there are no winners in this game, you know, not just, you know, obviously like the bigger game of life, you know, how society and the economy, how everything is set up as it is today. And I believe there is one character that embodies this the best, and that's Cho Sang-woo. He turns out to be the one that I think people hate the most.
Yeah.
And I think that blinds people to the fact that he technically has done every single thing that society has told him to do in order to win. He went to college. He did all the things to become
had a great business.
Had a great business that went under. He got into debt. So even in the outside world, he was doing everything he was told to do. And, you know, he was told like, this is how you be successful, play by these rules, and you will not fail. He failed because the rules, they don't apply. They're not real. None of that is going to help you.
Yeah. I mean,
so when he gets into the game, he still continues to play by the rules of capitalism, the rules of society under capitalism. And he commits some horrible, horrible acts of violence and, you know, murder. And he, you know, obviously he doesn't win, and he sees in the end that, you know, it really doesn't matter what
and he
does. You know, he comes to the realization himself that, you know, that the game has been rigged from the start and there really is no winning.
Right. Which anybody who's ever been to a carnival in their life should have learned. The people who make the games always make them so that they come out the winners. Like every casino in the world, like that's
right. The house always wins.
The house always wins. And this was a perfect example of that. And it just, I think that's probably, you know, because I when I was watching it, I was like, oh man, yeah, this is just talking about all the things that I have issues with capitalism. It's like the fact that we, you know, the middle class has disappeared, and, you know, the cost of living has skyrocketed and people are struggling for health. I mean, you and I live in Los Angeles, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world. And it's like, this shouldn't be how people live. But then when you sit there and watch it and you're like, oh, but are we doing it to ourselves because we're playing the game? But then it becomes that vicious cycle of, well, we don't know how to stop playing the game because, you know, as we saw over the summer with all the protests that were happening, you know, the Black Lives Matter protests and the defund the police protests, it's like, and, you know, now with a lot of the union protests and everything, did it really change anything? Not really. A couple investigations happened, but that's about it. And now people are arguing about a public health crisis, which is just like, what?
Well, and that's kind of the thing is that the system, without changing the structure, you know, you do a few things to,
you try to push the needle a little bit, but
to appease the masses and, you know, and fix some surface level problems here or there. The, you know, the system is still going to chug onwards. We're still going to have the same exact problems. I forgot who said it, but it was, the saying is, it's easier to imagine death and the end of the world than it is easier to imagine the end of capitalism.
Right.
And so in this show, doesn't give us the answers.
No.
That's kind of what I find very frustrating and annoying with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that they give us all these big picture problems, especially when they get into government, economic, and and social systems. They point out issues, especially in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I was just gonna say,
they point out issues and they bring up these things, and you're like, yeah, you have all these big picture ideas pointing out these issues, and you are apparently willing or want to grapple with them or put them in your media, but you're not brave enough or smart enough or willing to present actual solutions.
Yeah. That was the big issue I had with Falcon and Winter Soldier, is the group, the woman they set up as the big bad. I was like, I kind of connect with you a lot more than I do with what's going on over here. And they tried to create this villain, but they did it so poorly. And the fact that Falcon ended up going against her, one, made no sense with his character development, and two, kind of undermined exactly what I think Marvel was trying to do, which was to address the social issues that we were all struggling with, or obviously continue to struggle with.
Right. And it's when you have, Squid Games is a bit differently, but when you have big studios like Marvel trying to be current with these social issues, they fall flat on their face. They don't give you solutions, because if they were to give you if they were to give you an actual solution, it would basically be them going up against themselves, because they're Disney. They are the largest.
They're making billions of dollars.
They're making billions of dollars, and it does not behoove them one iota to change anything.
Well, and that's
why would they present you with a solution of change when it doesn't profit them?
Right. And that's the ultimate irony of Squid Game, is the other thing that the internet is talking about is Netflix is the winner of this. They are making bank. One, it upped their subscribers. Who knows what they're getting in ad revenue? Now there's merchandise.
I was just gonna say, I'm like,
we can buy the hoodies, and it's like, oh cool, we're gonna be anti-capitalist by partaking in capitalism to buy shit we don't need,
to buy merchandise that is most likely made like unethically. Most likely made unethically. And that was the thing that I was going to say. The hoodie is probably, to me, the most egregious part about the whole them making billions and billions off of this series. It's a catch-22. What are you going to do?
It's like, it's entertainment. You want to promote art.
It's entertainment, it's art, it's pop culture, it's popular art.
Yes.
So of course it's going to make money. I'm really glad that we have more entertainment that's coming outside of Hollywood, outside of the US, from different perspectives. That is absolutely wonderful.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it's just, I think it is the sting of irony that really just kind of hurts the most, because that like Squid Games and winning the game, like the whole thing is a fantasy,
right?
And the reality, and once you're done watching, you're still stuck in the reality. There still are no answers, there's still no solutions given to the problems, and you still have to continue on living in it. And I think that is where a lot of the true horror in the show comes from, is it coming out of it.
Well, and they
having
obviously
to just go on to the next Netflix show and give them more of your money,
right? And obviously, whether or not they intended for a season 2, obviously it's now guaranteed to happen based on how successful it was, but who knows if originally they ever planned on it, but obviously they end the show with, oh, are we gonna get a solution? And that kind of infuriated me a little bit as well, because I'm like, this guy, Seong Ji-hoon, he's like, no, I'm not going to touch the money. It's dirty money, even though he had promised to take care of the other people's families, which he did finally a year later.
Right.
But he's got a daughter, and he's getting on a flight to go see his daughter. Cause I was like, oh, okay, cool. So now we've gotten over
just gonna live
dealing with the trauma. Now he's moving on. He's helping these families. He's going to finally reconnect with his family. So maybe this is the positive that came out of it. But then he stops and decides he's going to try and take down the game, obviously putting his family on the back burner. And it's like, okay, so this is leading us for taking down the game, but like, isn't him walking away from his daughter just as it was a very confusing message there at the end. It's like
the end. Yeah, I was just going to say the end for me. I haven't given it that like philosophical thought really, but like just on the surface level, the end for me just didn't land. It didn't really work for me.
It didn't work with his character either, I didn't think, because everything he'd done was for his daughter.
Right. Like even just the setup of a season 2 and not having it just this contained like single season thing, I went to that cynical place of, well, now we got to set up for a season 2 to make more money.
Yeah.
And how are we going to do that?
What are we going to do different, now? And then that comes back to the whole conversation about the influence of money on art, because one of the reasons, obviously we're both in the industry, and it's like, those of us who get into it for the art, not to be superstars, it's whatever, it's like, oh, we love those indie movies, we love the movies that like were able to just tell good stories that didn't have massive budgets. And it's like, this, I mean, obviously this had a pretty big budget based on everything that we saw, but when you compare it to like The Mandalorian or The Witcher or Game of Thrones, it doesn't have that kind of budget, but it's like, well, now it's a huge hit. So now the studios are going to start getting involved. The money is going to start influencing what happens next. So now we've got the money influencing the art, and the art can no longer be honest and true to what it was originally, which is one of the arguments a lot of people make about the original Star Wars, is like the original Star Wars was made on a relatively small budget, all things considered. And by the time we got to the next trilogy, episodes 1 through 3, it's like, well, money ruined everything, because it's now we have all of this money, everything is limitless, and there's no one to say no.
Right. The answer to every suggestion, question is yes. Can we do this? Yes. Should we do this? Yes. But the ending was, I was mixed. I was a little disappointed in how it ended. I just kind of like, even if it ended on a defeatist note, I think I would have been absolutely fine with that. You don't have to, you don't have to give me answers, as long as it's okay. I guess here's the thing. I guess it's okay not to have the answers. Instead of provide me with something that is in between a yes and a no answer. It's a maybe. That
open-ended, ambiguous.
Give it a try, it was pointed out to me that Bo Burnham's Inside is a perfect example of somebody, Bo, who tries to grapple with big picture issues, but at the end of the day, at the end of his show, he basically comes out and says, I don't have the answers, and I kind of give up trying to find them. And that was extremely impactful. And I think it's a perfectly okay position to be as a human being.
Right.
You don't have to give answers. You don't owe people answers, because one person isn't going to fix the things that are broken, you know, like one person cannot give a definitive answer, and they cannot enact the amount of change that needs to happen.
But 467 of them might have been able to do that.
maybe. But like at the end of this show, it kind of suggests that, you know, one man, the right man to win, is the one that's going to change everything, which is kind of antithetical to, I think, the what they were going for with all the rest of the entirety of the series. But that's just my opinion. I also, because nobody else has touched on it yet, and I would be really upset if we didn't talk about the guards in the show. The guards in the show, and this is just me, but my theory, or my reading rather, of them is that they're supposed to stand in place of police and authority figures. Because they're basically the middlemen doing the dirty work of the upper class to keep the status quo. But they're also trapped in the system. I mean, they're treated like prisoners. They basically live in a prison cell, but they're given just enough incentive to continue to do that work, because they are given special treatment as far as not having to play the game.
What this reminded me of, honestly, was the Stanford prison experiment, which, if nobody's aware of that, it took place in the 70s when they were trying to see what exactly power does to people. And so a group of volunteers, you know, through the psychology department, you know, half of the volunteers were prisoners and half the volunteers were guards. And it was showing that good people can turn into monsters when you give them enough power, because, you know, they ended up having to stop the experiment early because, you know, they were starting to beat the prisoners, because it's like, oh, we can get away with this and there's no ramifications. And it's like, so, you know, when we're having these conversations about police brutality, which has become an epidemic beyond the pale, it's like, well, if we're able to see this type of behavior with quote unquote average people, when you take that and synthesize it and give even more power, because obviously these guys in the show are running around with assault rifles and sniper rifles. So it's like, well, of course, it's in their best interest to keep playing their game for the small perks that they're getting.
Also, that Stanford prison experiment set the precedent for all other sociological studies that came after it. Absolutely. It's highly illegal.
Please, if you don't know about this, read up on it, because honestly one of the most disturbing things.
There are a couple of documentaries about it that have, you know, actual footage and studies and reenactments and stuff. It's not for the faint of heart.
No, not at all.
But it is absolutely fascinating, and any sociologist worth their salt out there, you know, it's one of the first things that you learn about, especially because if you're going to do a study on anything, this experiment is what laid the groundwork for how you have to go about submitting your proposition or your proposal for studies, and you know, what you're going to do to make sure that it's ethical. But that's a very good point.
Well, the other thing that I thought they left kind of open-ended was Wong Jun Hall, who played the cop. And I was like, okay, cool. We're going to get this cop. He's going to infiltrate. He's trying to find his brother. And then it turns out his brother is the second in command bad guy. And then he just dies and nothing happens. Like all of this, I was very confused as to what his purpose was from a storytelling standpoint, because he didn't change anything. He didn't expose anything. So I was like, they set him up to be this maybe whistleblower type character, and it led to nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, the one good apple in the bunch can't save you.
Oh no, exactly.
You know,
and maybe that's the moral of the story, that there are no heroes.
I also think that it was more so a lot of it was more so to uncover the identity of the front man,
right,
and his story, which
we
is
never
interesting
explained that either,
because the front man, the brother, he argues that the games are fair and that this is the only place in which, you know, people of that background can rise above their circumstances. And he was a past winner. So, but he took away the absolute opposite message that, you know, Song Gi-hun took. And to be honest, the front man is wrong, period. There's no other, I mean, like, you can read it in a different way if you want to, but ethically he's wrong. It is not, like, the system actually, it isn't fair.
It's not fair.
A lot of the games are rigged against people, you know,
right. Well, and even if you're talking about, like, okay, if we're being literal and okay, we're going to kill the guy, you know, for cheating, you know, for knowing what the game was in advance, for not being fair, but it's like, but that's not taking into consideration everyone's socioeconomic background. Like, we're different ages, we're different genders, we're different, we come from different parts of the world. So, like, even if we're all playing the same game, our upbringing in and of itself means we are not on a level playing field, and we never will be, because everybody's past experience is going to put them on a different, you know, level than the other person.
Right. So yeah, I think that was kind of the point of the cop. And then obviously, since we are going to be subjected to, and I say subjected to because I really expect season 2,
there will be a season. I'm sure Netflix
season 2 is not going to blow me away.
No, I mean, I think we know it's going to be Song Ji-hoon trying to
be
take down the thing. He's going to take it down. There's going to be
become the John Wick
brother. He's going to realize he was wrong, and then in the end, he's reunited with his daughter.
Going to be the John Wick of Squid Games. So I know right off the bat it's not going to impress me as much as the first season. It's going to be the heroes of this generation, where you get season 1 and it was great, and you know, they tied a ribbon on it. And that's the thing, is when you pretty much tie a bow on you stop. Don't go any further.
But this is where capitalism is influencing art,
right?
Like, oh, we never meant to have a sequel, but we made so much money, now we have to have a sequel. Like, we're getting Wonder Woman 3 because apparently we needed that. You know what?
I do have a theory that the cop is alive.
I do too. I think if they are doing a sequel,
if you don't see him, if you don't see a body, you
know. If anything in movies has taught us anything, it's that.
Right. So I feel, especially with what's his name, who we didn't talk about, the Ho Nam. Number 001.
Yeah, exactly. The mastermind behind all of this,
who just like
was bored and rich and
crushed my goddamn heart, but that's fine.
Yeah, you're like,
they took, so it kind of makes me upset that they did that twist, because it took probably the most powerful moment in the entire series and just shat on it.
Yeah.
Emotionally, for me, I think that was the series' high point, was that one episode, because you have three different groups.
Yeah,
you have 3 different groups of people who you're following, you know, their separate tragedies for that one game, and they did it really, really well.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I get the idea that what they wanted to do was come across as like the 1% are miserable in this system as well. And it's like, I can't really give a shit if they are,
because
or
you
if
decided
they're
to
not.
take everyone
like,
down. You were bored, and
apathy and boredom is not the same thing as trying to figure out a way to survive day to day.
Yeah. and not have your legs amputated because you can't afford to get treatment for diabetes. It's like,
I get the idea of trying to give everybody a fair shake and prove that, you know, under capitalism nobody can be truly happy. I get it, but you also they also, to me, and this might be not the same for everybody else, the twist or the turn rather could have been amazing for other people, but I just felt that it took the one really meaningful relationship that is supposed to be the teaching moment and the learning moment, the growth moment for Seong Gi-hoon, and twisted it so that by making the old man the bad guy, you could easily argue that Seong Gi-hoon didn't need to take away the lessons that he learned in that one episode.
Right.
You know, and it tries to teach a different sort of lesson, like this lofty thing with the guy who's dying on the street, and he's like, do you still believe in good people now? It's like, well, I believed in you until you were now somehow this secret bad guy asshole. But like, I thought we already learned this lesson. I thought this was the thing that like kept him going. But you know, it just seemed, it was an odd thing to kind of like shoehorn in there at the end.
It definitely, it definitely struck me as weird. And I get like, okay, you're old and you're bored and you're rich and you want to do something for thrills, but like, did you really have to kill 466 other people to do that?
See, and that's where it doesn't really make sense to me, is because the guy does show an interesting amount of understanding and compassion for the people around him.
He does.
And somehow I don't know, there are a few things that just didn't really mesh with me, didn't really mesh well for me regarding that. But other than that, I mean, I thought it was a great show. I thought it was very strong. There was just a few writing choices that it's near the end. It's the end of the show is what kind of just brought it down.
Same. That final episode just kind of, the final two up.
The final episode.
Enjoyed it. Again, obviously everyone is taking something different away from this. You know, is it an anti-capitalist show? Yes, no. Are we criticizing the 1%? Yes. Are we criticizing ourselves? Yes, no. I mean, everyone's kind of coming at this differently, but in general, I think, one solid show. Acting was fantastic. If you don't mind blood and gore, it's definitely worth a watch. It's definitely at least going to get people thinking and talking. And I don't know, stranger things have happened with art and change has happened, but
this is my take on it. Conversation is great. Conversation, building community, and then giving back to the community is great. But Netflix, they can do better by taking some of that money and then maybe donating it to causes that help with some of these issues that they're talking about, like the debt and the poverty, and just trying to have people get their medical bills paid. That is a way that Netflix can kind of
ensuring that their crew is paid a living wage, because that's the thing that still isn't happening, again. But this was obviously not an American film. We had
it's not IATSE.
It's not IATSE.
But at the same time, it's still Netflix, and Netflix, it's the properties that they bring on to be streamed on their network. But I think that a way to kind of make up a little bit for that very like sort of cringy, like, I don't know, it kind of like gets under my skin factor that they're making so much money off of property off of a TV show that has these messages in them would be to, you know,
do something,
start doing some good work in the community.
Yeah, I agree. So those are our thoughts on Squid Game. Obviously, we could probably talk for another 2 hours about it, but let us know your thoughts in the comments. You know, did you love it? Did you hate it? What were your takeaways? Do you
dubbed versus subbed?
Yeah, I watched the subtitles. She watched the dubs. Even though I do dubbing for a living, I just like to see the actors' original performances. That being said, I know most of the dubbing actors who did the English version of this, and they are all brilliant performers. So yeah,
so please, if you like the video, please leave us a like, leave us a comment. The comments really help with the algorithm. Subscribe if this channel is your thing, and then ring the bell to get notifications every time that we do an update. You know, we throw up videos every Friday at noon Pacific Standard Time. We would love to thank you for doing all of that, or do none of it. We're just glad you're here.
Yeah. We got a little something for everyone. So if Squid Game wasn't your thing, I'm sure we've got an episode that talks about something you do like.
Yes. So have a wonderful morning, noon, or night, wherever you are. And thank you for watching. All right. Bye.
Bye.